Oh, let's debate and vote some more. How's that sound? Oh, yeah. There's somebody who's thrilled to be Democratic today. All right. So our next item of business is to consider and vote on the proposed changes to section C-2.3 regarding inclusion. And the text is found at page 88 of the final agenda. So I'll ask the first vice moderator to come make the appropriate motion.
Moved that the proposed changes to section C-2.3 regarding inclusion found at page 88 of the final agenda be adopted by this assembly.
And Lou's going to be making the statement. Now, did we have a change at all?
Yes, we did. And they're in the notes that we got.
Okay, so let's make sure today I think we're done with honeydew for today, but you need the white sheet that starts at the top changed to bylaw section C-3.1. They were handed out this morning, but you might want one now. So if you need one, raise your hand. Oh, let's wait a minute and let the tellers even get them in hand. And if you happen to have a bunch of them, just loan them to somebody else. They look like this. We handed them out prior to the last session. While we're getting those and handing those out, I'm going to go to, before I even go to the procedural microphone, which I'll go to in a moment, we actually have one change that was included as a result of our mini-assembly yesterday. We incorporated an amendment to rearrange actually two sentences in the second paragraph. Okay, all right, okay. And can we get that change up on the screen? Cool. So this is what's on the white sheet of paper as well, but the only change was to move the sentence that appeared second, which said "we strive," in front of the first sentence. So it's a rearrangement of this paragraph. So we strive to be an association of congregations that truly welcomes all persons. It's a switch. So tellers, do we have some paper, do we think? Yeah, they're bringing them in now. So raise your hand. I'm going to go to the pro microphone and recognize our trustee Lou Finney to give the position of the Board of Trustees on this change. Lou?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. You obviously noted that I am not the Reverend Dr. Michael Tino, who was supposed to make this announcement.
Why isn't he here?
He left yesterday morning early so that he could be in the location for his daughter's birth. I am most pleased to announce that Nora Lucia Dyer Tino arrived at approximately 2 p.m. yesterday afternoon.
Thank you. All right. So, what does the board think about this other thing, though?
I am Lou Finney, the trustee from the Mountain Desert District. 50 years ago, when we first introduced a non-discrimination clause into our bylaws, racial discrimination was, in fact, the law in many states. For Unitarian Universalists to include this statement amidst the promises our congregations make to each other as an association, our principles, sources, and our purposes was important and groundbreaking. In 2009, the Commission on Appraisal, acting as our study commission, called for a new era, an era of inclusion, in which the challenge put before our congregations is not mere non-discrimination, but rather the dismantling of persistent systems of oppression that plague us to this day. In suggesting this new language for Article 2, the Commission on Appraisal asked us to put in new aspiration in our most important bylaw. In 2009, this language did not pass because it could not be separated from other proposed amendments to Article 2. The delegates instructed your board to bring this language back to you as soon as possible. Here it is. Your board strongly urges you pass this language and also to dispense with the need for an additional study and review commission. Your board comes to you committed to both inclusion and non-discrimination. Many kinds of discrimination are still, unfortunately, legal. We are, however, convinced that our non-discrimination clause belongs not in the difficult-to-change Article 2, but rather in our rules, where it can be more easily debated and amended by the GA when it becomes clear to us that groups have been excluded from it. That will happen next year.
Thank you.
We ask today for your vote.
Thank you. Excellent. All right, we have no one at the con microphone. We have no one at the pro microphone, but we do have a delegate at the amendment microphone.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I would like to move unincorporated Amendment B. Oh, I apologize, Madam Moderator. I'm Carl Ponanen, delegate from the Unitarian Universalist Church of Greater Lansing, Michigan.
Thank you, sir.
And I would like to move unincorporated Amendment B, which failed at the mini assembly by a vote of 13 to 20. Madam Moderator, the text of this should be on your white sheet if you haven't received a white sheet yet. That's where the details on this. Madam Moderator, this the amendment I'm proposing, instead of asking this General Assembly to vote to delete the non-discrimination clause, this amendment I am proposing would keep the non-discrimination clause and would move it outside of the Article 2, the notoriously difficult to amend Article 2. Madam Moderator, I believe that this amendment that I am proposing keeps the intent of the Board of Trustees, which I fully support, and I fully support the new section on inclusion. I believe that's an incredible section. I think this still accomplishes all of the goals of the Board of Trustees, but does not ask this General Assembly to go on the record of having said that we vote to delete the non-discrimination clause. There is no way that I am going to vote on the record to delete our passage about non-discrimination and to say we're going to delete this and we're not going. There's a long list here that I won't read for you. I'm not going to vote to delete that language completely from our bylaws and bylaws and rules. Furthermore, and I'm certainly never going to vote to delete from our bylaws the phrase without requiring adherence to any particular interpretation of religion or to any particular religious belief or creed. I will never vote to delete that from our I can't imagine ever voting to delete that from our bylaws. Madam Moderator, I think that the amendment that I am proposing will help the board achieve the 4/5. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I could explain something, but we so like hearing from our legal counsel. This one is also a timing issue, so just some information, not advocacy in either direction. But would you provide information about this path and about the... Okay, thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Moderator. As I think I mentioned this morning, this is a C bylaw. It's a C bylaw within Article 2. It takes 2 years to amend. And so if you move, and the board has said, strike that, next year, if you vote to pass the inclusion clause for the second year, then the deletion of non-discrimination and the addition of the inclusion clause would become effective. In other words, if you vote for this amendment, the non-discrimination clause will not become ineffective tomorrow. Because remember, it takes 2 years of votes to amend a C bylaw. Everybody remember that? So what you would have if you adopt, just so understand, if you adopt the amendment as proposed, the non-discrimination clause would appear in 2 places in the bylaws for the next year. Then if you pass this bylaw as part of a second-year amendment to Article 2, it would appear in the language in Article 16. Is that clear for people? Okay, it takes 2 years to amend a C bylaw. By voting out the non-discrimination, you're not deleting it over the next year. And the board has said that when you come back next year, they will propose the non-discrimination language in a G rule. Okay, I hope that was helpful.
Thank you. So we had a pro statement, an explanatory statement. I recognize the delegate at the con microphone.
Madam Moderator, my name is Ted Fetter, a delegate from the Princeton, New Jersey congregation. I think this is a very good illustration of form over substance. There is no disagreement here about the substance. The advantage, once we pass the Section C2 bylaw on inclusion, the non-discrimination language as a rule is much more flexible than putting it into a brand new article in the bylaws. When we as Unitarian Universalists become aware of some new manner of inclusion and non-discrimination, we can right there at the General Assembly amend the General Assembly rule to incorporate it into our overall determination for non-discrimination. If we make it a bylaw on top of the inclusion bylaw, then it's a much more complicated amendment process. I believe this will be much more effective as a GA rule. Thank you.
The delegate at the con microphone.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Angela Bridgman, UU Fellowship of the Poconos, Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. And it is my understanding that with this vote, without the amendment, the language that people are wanting to keep is going to be moved to a different section of the bylaws. And I support that because we'd still be keeping it, but in a different section of the bylaws, and that bylaw would then also be easier to amend. And quite frankly, I have a little problem with the language of the existing non-discrimination as opposed to inclusion. Inclusion is better for me because the non-discrimination delineates race, it delineates sexual orientation, it delineates gender, but it does not delineate gender identity. Thank you.
Something and see if we can bite on it, okay? We're out of debate time for this, and if we wanted to extend debate, we could. But I actually think that there might be a solution that's pretty close at hand if we just stretch out a little farther. We want to make sure that we don't lose the strong language of non-discrimination.
Yes.
We're worried because we won't be here next year, and we don't know that the people who are here will be as sharp on this as we are.
Or interested. Or interested.
And we know that we like inclusion. Some of us really think the way to do that is to make it a new article in the bylaw, okay? Some of us really believe that we need a new G rule. Okay, I don't think any of you are terribly excited about whether it's an amendment or a G rule. Either of them come back to you. But some of us don't want a new amendment because it makes the bylaws harder to use. Is there a delegate in the House that would amend the current unincorporated Amendment B to say to move the section to a new rule G-2.3? Would the guy who moved it originally do this?
Moderator.
Are we down with this? See, I don't care if it's in two places for a year. I'm fine with that. I just want to know where to find it later. Are we confused? Are you ready to vote? We're voting on the amendment. Oh, we have to vote on the amendment that was just made. Is there a second? All those in favor of amending the amendment to make it a G rule? Legal counsel said I could do this, by the way, just so you know I'm not going too far afield alone. Thank you. All those opposed to making it a G rule? Wow, we liked that. Although I'd never go too far afield alone, you are all with me right now. Okay, ready? So now we're going to vote the unincorporated Amendment B as just amended, which would say we're going to take the section that currently says non-discrimination, pick it up and move it to a G rule, number 2.3. Are we good? All those in favor of seeing it move? Thank you. All those opposed? We loved that as well. And so now the last piece of this says that we want to make sure we do two things, and this is the tricky part and why you had a procedural question. I have no idea what gen lock mode means on that monitor, but it's scaring me. I already thought I had a gen. Okay. Okay. We need an 80% vote to dispense with a study commission to talk about what we just might want to do with this. So it's a high bar. If we have a lower bar than that, we're going to end up needing a study commission, but we had one of those a few years ago, and that's where all this comes from. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're voting on the main motion on C-2.3 as amended with the move of the non-discrimination item. Are we all good? All those in favor, raise and hold your voting cards. Thank you. All those opposed? That was very nice work. The motion clearly carries. I'm going to recognize the delegate at the procedural microphone. You're not going to ask what we just did, are you?
No, absolutely not. I'm
What you
thrilled
got?
with what we just did. Thank you. Linda Ulrich, Summer UU Fellowship in Santee in San Diego County, California. I'm glad that language is back in. However, there is a glaring omission in the language of non-discrimination, which was brought up before in the con microphone. I don't think it needs to be a con. I don't think we throw out everything. But we definitely need to include gender identity because it is not covered by any of the language in there. And my question is, now what? How do we do that?
Well, see, here's the interesting thing. The reason that we were in the middle and had done a half vote, a 50% vote, and we stopped at 2/3, was we stopped to include gender identity, and then we read Article 15, which said we had to have a study commission that was multi-year, and that got us to right here. And then the board brought last year fixing that Article 15, and now we're fixing Article 2, and now we're ready for gender identity. Tom Bean, what would they do next if they wanted to have a motion to now modify what will be in 2 years, because we have to vote this again, right? We just voted the first year of a C bylaw change. We have to vote it again next year. But then we will have this Article G that we already created.
Yes.
We could start amending that now, right?
Yes.
Like next year.
Next year.
That
Oh,
now.
Not now?
Not this hot second now.
No, because for the same reason we've said, if you had voted the non-discrimination clause out, Monday morning, there's still a discrimination clause. Because we need 2 consecutive years to make that effective. So when you vote next year, you will make the G rule, you'll put the G rule in, you'll put the inclusion rule, and 1 year later, because it's a G rule, you can amend that to add gender identity in a single year.
Next year?
No.
You mean we can't take action?
But the rule doesn't become, the rule becomes effective. It's a rule now.
It's a
Next
rule
year.
now.
Next year.
All right, and we do that in the mini assembly? That's how
You
we
do that by somebody bringing it, asking the board to move it, or by having a conversation with UUA legal counsel. How many people would be interested in having a conversation about that with legal counsel?
How many?
Wait a minute.
You got a party. That could actually happen
Why can't we amend it now?
because
By
it
a
was not
vote.
on the agenda to do so.
Okay.
I mean, there's the simple fact. It was not on the agenda to do so. We have to do it next year.
We can't vote to change the agenda right now.
So here's the deal.
This is such a glaring
You are
error.
people of unlimited power. But the thing is, we have an agenda for a reason, so people know whether they should come to vote on things and to make motions on things. And by changing the agenda at this point to add something, and the answer is no, you can't, because the bylaws say no. But the reason they say no is it disenfranchises all kinds of people. And especially when we're trying to deal with how people are disenfranchised already. Right? Next year. How many of you will help make this happen next year?
What do we have to do?
It took us this long to unwind. You know, our bylaws were often written to prevent us from changing them too much because next year's people might not be as smart as this year's people. And we've been dealing with this one for 6 years. It took us 6 years of bringing you business to get to the point where we have a G rule next year, a year earlier than we'd planned, thanks, Carl, a G rule that we can amend next year. It's taken us 6 years. There's a lesson in there, friends, for how we write bylaws in a state of mistrust. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Wish we could. Sorry we can't. Loving you all. Can we sing? Can we just please sing?
And not coincidental at all that the song I had chosen is Turn the World Around.
Hallelujah. Let's do that turning stuff, David.
Yes, let's do it.
In tomorrow's first plenary at the latest, well, second plenary at the latest, UUA Legal Counsel will give us a 5-minute brief on how you get items on your General Assembly agenda like G rule changes next year, okay? He may be assisted by the parliamentarian and others in this regard. The next item we have is debate and vote on